Okay, so here we are. We will deal with some questions for the revision before the midterm. Many of these questions are related to the midterm exam, the theory, and some of them are related to the virtual lab exam as well. Let's deal with the first question. Which of the following directly regulates the movement of materials into and out of a cell? The cell consists of a cell membrane or a plasma membrane and a cytoplasm. It is actually the cell membrane that control movement of substances into and out of the cell, the plasma membrane. So while doing so, it acts as a barrier that separates between the external and internal environment of the cell. And this is not the only function of the cell membrane. The cell membrane helps to identify the cell to other cells, and also it is used in intercellular signaling, communication with other cells. So anyhow, one of its main functions of the cell membrane, of the plasma membrane, is that it regulates movement of material into and out of the cell. The cytoplasm is located inside the cell membrane. It can be divided into cytosol, containing inclusion bodies, and cytoplasmic organelles. One of these organelles is the mitochondria, and the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It has other functions, like it plays an important role in apoptosis and contains some DNA that controls the synthesis of proteins, but it doesn't play a role in movement of material into and out of the cell. And the nucleus is another organelle that is involved in the process of protein synthesis. So the correct answer here, it is the plasma membrane. Which of the following is involved in active transport? Active transport is the process that requires energy to transport substances through the cell membrane. Substances cross the membrane by a variety of processes, including passive transport, as we can see here, which is the movement of substances down their concentration gradient, driven by their own kinetic energy. But the active transport requires the use of ATP to drive substances against their concentration gradient. So it's active transport, in other words, is the process that requires the use of energy to drive substances. Diffusion, as you can see here, that diffusion is whether it is through a lipid layer or through a protein channel, or it is a facilitated diffusion. This is a diffusion down the concentration gradient, and it is not considered as an active. Just one point here about facilitated diffusion, that facilitated diffusion, in facilitated diffusion, substance binds to a specific transporter protein, and this protein will move the substance across the cell membrane. Either the substance is too large to fit in the protein pore, or it is insoluble in lipids. Filtration actually is a process that is different from diffusion, and in which substances move across the plasma membrane down a pressure gradient. It is not related to active transport, which is the transport of substances either down or up the concentration gradient. The filtration is related to pressure gradient and should not be confused with concentration gradient. Osmosis is the net movement of water through a membrane from an area of high water concentration to an area of low water concentration. So instead of a solute, it's a water that moves, and usually it moves from high concentration of water to a low concentration of water. In other words, it does not require the need of energy, and it is not a process of active transport. This leaves us with phagocytosis. Phagocytosis is a kind of vesicular transport. It is cell eating by macrophages and white blood cells, which engulf either worn out cells or bacteria. And in this process, pseudopods are going to be formed. And these pseudopods, they are like small feet and they surround and engulf the substance. This process requires the use of energy, so it is a kind of active transport. So the correct answer here is phagocytosis. The special sacs within a cell that contain enzymes needed to digest substances taken into the cell are: the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It contains enzymes that are needed for chemical reactions, which are located in the cristae of the mitochondria, but not for digestion of substances taken into the cell. The endoplasmic reticulum, which is a network of membranes forming flattened sacs or tubules. If it is rough, then it's for protein synthesis. And if it is smooth endoplasmic reticulum, it is for the synthesis of fatty acids and steroids, or detoxification of harmful substances, or it acts as a reservoir for calcium ion, like in the sarcoplasmic reticulum in muscle. So it's not related to enzymes that digest substances taken into the cell. The Golgi complex processes and packages the proteins that are produced by the rough endoplasmic reticulum and forms vesicles to export them. The ribosomes, these are made of ribosomal RNA and proteins, and they are the sites of protein synthesis. And so they are not related to digestion. It is the lysosomes, which are the membranous vesicles that digest molecules and microbes, recycles own organelles, or sometimes digest the entire cell as in autolysis after death. Or it releases the enzymes to the extracellular compartment. So the correct answer here is lysosomes. Which of the following statements is correct? Holocrine glands secrete a small portion of a cell. Holocrine glands, they accumulate the secretory products in the cytosol, and then the whole cell, not a small portion of a cell, the whole cell ruptures to release their product. So this is incorrect. Merocrine glands are characterized by secretion of the whole cell. In merocrine secretion, cells release their products by exocytosis. So this is incorrect. Exocrine glands secrete their products directly into the bloodstream. Actually, this is a feature of endocrine glands and not the exocrine glands. Exocrine glands, they secrete into the free surface or into ducts, and their secretion does not reach the bloodstream. Option E, endocrine glands secrete their products into the surface of the body. Again, it has been just mentioned that the exocrine glands, they secrete their products onto the surface of the body or into ducts, but the endocrine glands, they secrete hormones that go to the bloodstream, and they are ductlets. Apocrine glands are characterized by secretion of the outer or apical portion of the cell, and this is correct. The apocrine glands, they accumulate the secretory product on the upper surface of the cell, which then pinches off. But the remaining part of the cell can repair itself. The mammary gland is an example of apocrine gland. So this is correct. The muscle that forms the wall of the gastrointestinal tract is derived from which of the following embryonic layers? All the tissues in the body, they primarily arise from germ layers within the embryo, and these are the ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. The muscles that form the wall of the gastrointestinal tract are smooth muscle, and the muscular tissue in general, whether it's smooth, cardiac, or skeletal muscle, is derived from mesoderm. The ectoderm is the origin of nerve tissue, as well as some of the epithelial tissue, like the epithelial tissue forming the epidermis of the skin. The endoderm forms the epithelial lining of the gastrointestinal tract, but does not form the muscular wall of the gastrointestinal tract. Which of the following types of cell junctions allow communication between cells? Here are the 5 types of cell junctions. The adherence junctions, they resist separation. For example, during contractile activities, so they do not allow communication between cells. The desmosomes are like the adherence junctions in the sense that they resist separation, but their structure differs from the adherence junctions. In adherence junctions, the transmembrane proteins are connected by microfilaments on the inside of the membrane, but in the desmosomes, there are intermediate filaments. In spite of the difference in the structure, the desmosomes do not allow communication between cells. Communication between cells is allowed by gap junctions, and in gap junctions, the membrane proteins, they form channels, so substances can diffuse from one cell to another. And the best example of the presence of gap junctions is between the cardiac muscle fibers, and usually they are present in the region of the intercalated disc. The hemidesmosomes resemble the desmosomes, but they link this cell to a basement membrane. So they are only present on the basal surface of the cell, and they only connect the cell. They do not allow communication between cells. The tight junctions seal off the intercellular spaces and inhibit the passage of substances in between the cells and are not related to communication between the cells. So the correct answer here is that the gap junctions, they allow communication between cells. Which of the following statements regarding epithelium is incorrect? Cuboidal cells may be classified as simple or stratified. Actually, the classification of epithelium depends on two features. One of them is the shape of the surface cell. So they could be squamous, cuboidal, or columnar, or transitional. And the second is the arrangement of cells into layers, whether they are simple, stratified, and pseudostratified. So cuboidal cells may be classified as simple or stratified. And this is correct. Undergoes limited regeneration when damaged. A feature of the epithelial tissue is that there is rapid cell division, and the epithelial tissue can constantly renew and repair itself. Like, for example, the epithelial tissue of the surface of the skin in the epidermis, or in the lining of the gastrointestinal or in the respiratory tracts. So it does not have limited regeneration capacity. Limited regeneration is a feature of muscular tissue or nervous tissue, but not of the epithelial tissue. So B is incorrect. However, let's read the other options. It is avascular, and this is correct. It is without blood vessels, and it depends in its nutrition on the diffusion of nutrients from the underlying connective tissue. D, it consists of closely packed cells with little or no intercellular spaces. This is again, it is correct. Unlike the connective tissue, where there is a lot of intercellular spaces, there is matrix, and the cells are not so closely packed. Diffusion of oxygen occurs readily in squamous cells. That's correct. Squamous cells, which are very thin, they allow the diffusion of oxygen through them, like what happens, for example, in the lining of the alveoli of the lung, where it is lined by simple squamous epithelium. Which of the following statements regarding a hair is incorrect? Its shaft extends above the surface of the skin. That is true. The shaft of the hair, as you can see here, extends above the surface of the skin. It is the root of the hair that lies below the surface of the skin. Is composed of dead osteocytes Actually, the hair is composed of columns of dead keratinized epidermal cells, which are bound together by extracellular proteins. It is not formed of dead osteocytes. Osteocytes are the cells that are located in the bone tissue. Here we have dead keratinocytes. So this statement is incorrect. Let's look at the other statement. Sebaceous glands secrete their contents into the hair follicle. And this is correct. Sebaceous or oil glands, they secrete their content into the hair follicle. Most of the sweat glands, they secrete directly onto the surface of the skin, but there are some of the sweat glands that also secrete into the hair follicle, and these are the apocrine sweat glands. Option D, arrector pili muscles are attached to the hair follicle. That's correct. Arrector pili are smooth muscle cells located in the dermis, and they are attached to the hair follicle so that the contraction of the arrector pili muscle will result in straightening of the hair, and it forms the goosebumps as the hair is pulled vertically. The color of the hair is determined by the presence of melanin. Yes, the color of hair results of melanin that is produced in melanocytes in the bulb. So dark hair contains true melanin. Blonde and red hair contain melanin with iron and sulfur added. Gray hair is the result of decline in melanin production, and white hair has some air bubbles in the medullary shaft. So the incorrect answer here regarding the hair is that it's composed of dead osteocytes. The hair is composed of dead keratinocytes. Which of the following cells are not found in the epidermis? A. Keratinocytes. Actually, keratinocytes constitute about 90% of the cells that are present in the epidermis, and they are the cells that produce the keratin, which forms the stratum corneum. Melanocytes, these are, again, they are present in the epidermis. They produce the melanin pigment that determines the skin color. Langerhans cells, these are the intraepidermal macrophages. They arise from the bone marrow and migrate to the skin, and they participate in the immune response against microbes that invade the skin. Merkel cells are the tactile epithelial cells. They are located in the deepest layer of the epidermis, as you can see here, and they are related to a nerve ending, a sensory neuron. So all these cells are present in the epidermis. It's the fibrocytes that are not present in the epidermis. They are located in the dermis. These are cells of connective tissue, the fibrocytes. And so they are located in the underlying dermis, which is formed of connective tissue. The remodeling of bone is a function of which of the following pairs of cell types? The chondroblasts are the cells that produce cartilage, so they are not present in the bone. Osteoclasts are the huge cells that are formed of fused monocytes, and in the bone they function in bone resorption, either at the surface or in the endosteum. But the chondroblasts are not present in the bone. So osteoclasts are types of cells that are present in the bone, and they function actually in bone remodeling. Osteoblasts and osteoclasts, we have just mentioned that the osteoclasts are involved in bone modeling by bone resorption at the surface or at the endosteum. Now the osteoblasts, they form the matrix and the collagen fibers, but they cannot divide. Now osteoblasts are actually the cells of the bone, osteo, that form the matrix and collagen fibers. They are derived from osteogenic cells, and they are present in the periosteum and in the endosteum. So during bone remodeling, osteoblasts add new bone tissue and osteoclasts, they resorb the bone tissue and they work in pairs. And that will be the correct answer. Let's look at the other options. Osteoblasts, they put down bone, but they do not work in pairs with fibrocytes because fibrocytes are the cells that are present in connective tissue proper. Chondroblasts and chondrocytes, both chondroblasts and chondrocytes, they are responsible for the formation of cartilage and they are not involved in bones. The chondrocytes, which are present in cartilage, is incorrect. And osteocytes, the osteocytes, in fact, they are mature cells and they cannot produce the matrix like the osteoblasts, but they just maintain the matrix. So they are also not involved. And the correct answer here is the osteoblasts and osteocytes. Which of the following structures is not found in a typical long bone? A, the endosteum. The endosteum is the lining of marrow cavity and it is present in all the bones. So it is present in the bone, in the long bone. The diaphysis, C, is the shaft of the bone, another name for the shaft of the bone, and it is one of the parts of the bone because the bone has long bone has two distended ends and a narrow shaft or diaphysis. The medullary cavity, this is the marrow cavity, and it is present in the long bone. Usually it contains the yellow bone marrow in the mature. The metaphysis, E, is the region of the growth plate, the epiphyseal line. So this is the region of the metaphysis. It's the region between the epiphysis and the diaphysis. So it's in between these two. And it is present in long bone. The perichondrium is not present in the long bone because the perichondrium is the connective tissue that surrounds the cartilage. In bone, whether long or any other type of bone, the bone is surrounded by periosteum, not by perichondrium. And the periosteum is the tough membrane that contains, apart from the fibrous layer, it contains an osteogenic layer. It contains bone cells and blood vessels that nourish and help with the repair of the bone. So the correct answer here is that the perichondrium is not found in a typical long bone. The basic unit of compact bone is now the osteon or the Haversian system is formed of concentric rings or lamellae of calcified matrix surrounding a vertically oriented blood vessel, which is called the central canal or Haversian canal. You can see the osteon here, and it is actually the basic unit of compact bone. The Haversian canal is the central canal of the Haversian system, and it is a component of the osteon. So it is not by itself the basic unit, it's a component of the basic unit. Volkmann canal, these are the horizontal canals that connect between the Haversian canals and the periosteum, and they contain the blood vessels that are derived from the periosteum. The trabecula is a feature of spongy bone. It's a lattice work of thin plates of bone. These are oriented along the lines of stress. They are not concentric. The lacuna is the space in which the osteocyte is found. It constitutes part of the osteon, but it is not the osteon. It is not the basic unit of the compact bone. As I mentioned, that the osteon consists of lamellae of calcified matrix around the Haversian canal, and in these concentric lamellae there are osteocytes found in spaces called lacunae, and these lacunae, they communicate with each other through canaliculi, which contain processes of osteocytes, so that one osteocyte can connect to the other osteocyte. So the correct answer here, the basic unit of compact bone, is the osteon. The shape of the external ear is maintained by which of the following types of tissues? The reticular connective tissue in E forms the stroma of organs, like, for example, in the lymph node or in the spleen. So it forms like a meshwork that filters and removes worn out blood cells or bacteria, and it does not maintain the shape of the external ear. The external ear is formed of cartilage, but which type of cartilage? Hyaline cartilage, although it's the most abundant type of cartilage, but it is mainly present in joints as articular cartilage. The periosteum is the dense connective tissue that surrounds the bone, and there's no bone here in the auricle of the external ear. Adipose tissue might be present in the lobule of the ear, but it does not maintain the shape of the ear. What maintains the shape of the ear is the elastic cartilage, the third type of cartilage. We have three types of cartilage. The hyaline cartilage, which is the most abundant and has fine collagen fibers. The fibrocartilage, where there are more collagen fibers in the matrix. That's why it's more rigid and stiff and is present, for example, in the intervertebral disc, and considered the strongest type of cartilage. But the third type of cartilage is the elastic cartilage, which contains elastic fibers that help maintain the shape after deformation. A good example here is in the auricle of the ear, and the other example is that it's present in the epiglottis, the leaf-shaped cartilage that is present at the inlet of the larynx and acts as a valve to prevent the passage of water and food from the pharynx into the larynx during swallowing. So the correct answer here, the shape of the external ear is maintained by elastic cartilage. Which of the following bones contain a paranasal sinus? The paranasal sinuses are cavities that are present in some of the bones of the skull. These cavities are connected with the nose, and they are lined by the same mucous membrane that lines the nose. Hence, the name of these cavities is the paranasal sinuses. So as we can see here that there are frontal sinuses, and they are located in the frontal bone. They are responsible for frontal headache when the sinuses are inflamed. The mandible does not contain a sinus. The parietal bones, which are located on the side of the skull, also they do not contain a sinus. The occipital bone at the back of the skull does not contain the sinus, so as the temporal bone. Here is the temporal bone. This is the squamous part of the temporal bone, the mastoid process, and it doesn't contain a paranasal sinus. It contains cavities, but not the paranasal sinuses. And the paranasal sinus that you see here in green, it is superimposed on the temporal bone. It's located deeper. It is located in the body of the sphenoid bone that is located in the middle cranial fossa, deeper to the calvaria of the skull. So the correct answer here is that the frontal bone contains a paranasal sinus. The glenoid cavity of the pectoral girdle articulates with which of the following bones? So the glenoid cavity is located at the lateral angle of the scapula. It is a shallow cavity that articulates with the rounded head of the humerus, forming what we call the glenohumeral joint, because the joint is between the humerus and the glenoid cavity of the scapula, and this is the other name of the shoulder joint. So it articulates with the humerus. It doesn't articulate with the clavicle. What articulates with the clavicle is the acromion process of the scapula at the acromioclavicular joint. Tibia is a bone of the leg. Ulna is a bone of the forearm, and it's located away from the pectoral girdle. And the scapula itself, the glenoid fossa or the glenoid cavity is part of the scapula, so it does not articulate with the scapula. And the correct answer here is that the glenoid cavity articulates with the humerus. Which of the following are not located in the foot? These are bones, and we can see here that the phalanges are in fact located in the foot. There are three phalanges in the lateral four toes, two phalanges in the big toe. So they are located in the foot. The tarsal bones, there are 7 tarsal bones, including the talus and the calcaneus, and they constitute part of the foot. The short bones, short bones actually are the tarsal bones. The tarsal bones are a kind of short bones. So they are present. Arches, yes, there are arches, bony arches in the foot. There are 2 longitudinal arches. The medial one is deeper than the lateral one, and there is a transverse arch as well. These arches, they help to divide the weight of the body in between the anterior and posterior part of the foot. They act as shock absorbers. They allow us to move on uneven surfaces and improve the efficiency of the gait. So they are present in the foot. The only structure that is not present in the foot are the metacarpals. The metacarpals are the counterpart of the metatarsals. We have 5 metatarsal bones here. These are long bones. We start numbering them from medial to lateral in the foot. In the hand, they are called the metacarpals. So metacarpals are present in the hand, but not in the foot. Which of the following statements about muscle tissue is incorrect? There are 3 types of muscle: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle. Yes, there are 3 kinds of muscle. We have skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle fibers. The skeletal muscle, B, skeletal muscle is striated. Yes, the skeletal muscle is striated. It has dark and light bands, and it is striated because of the regular arrangement of the contractile elements, the actin and myosin filaments. Cardiac muscle is smooth. No, this is incorrect because cardiac muscle also is striated. So although it is involuntary, unlike the skeletal muscle, which is voluntary, but the cardiac muscle is striated. It is the smooth muscle that doesn't show the striations in the cytoplasm, and hence the cytoplasm appears smooth, and the name is smooth muscle. So the incorrect statement here is cardiac muscle is smooth. Let's look at the other statements. We have muscle tissue is involved in movement and heat production. Yes, it is involved in movement and heat production. And the best example here, we have what happens in during shivering in cold weather. It's contraction of muscles that will produce the heat. So this statement is correct. Statement E, each muscle fiber has a sarcolemma that surrounds the sarcoplasm. Yes, the muscle fiber actually is a cell, and it has a cell membrane that has a special name here. It's called the sarcolemma, and the cytoplasm of the cell is called the sarcoplasm. There's another special name here for the content of the cytoplasm, an organelle, which is the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, also called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So statement E is correct, and the only incorrect statement that the cardiac muscle is smooth. It is, on the contrary, it is striated, but it is involuntary. Which of the following muscles extend the forearm when contracted? So the triceps A, triceps brachii. Triceps brachii is located on the back of the forearm, and as you can see here, one of the heads is attached to the scapula, the other heads are attached to the humerus, and distally, the tendon of the muscle, the triceps muscle, is attached to the olecranon of the ulna, and when the muscle contracts, it will pull the ulna backwards, therefore it extends the forearm, and this is the correct answer. The other muscle, biceps femoris, as the name indicates, femoris, it's not located in the arm. In the arm, there is biceps brachii. Biceps femoris is located in the back of the thigh. So it's not located in the arm. It doesn't act on the forearm. And even the biceps brachii, which is present in the arm, it doesn't extend. It flexes the forearm at the elbow joint. Pectoralis major. Pectoralis major is located in the pectoral region, which is the anterior thoracic wall, and is attached to the humerus. It acts on the shoulder joint. It doesn't act on the forearm. It flexes the shoulder, it adducts and medially rotates, so it doesn't act on the forearm. Latissimus dorsi, this is the wide muscle of the back. As you can see it here, it tapers into a tendon that is attached to the humerus, and it acts on the shoulder joint again. It extends the shoulder, medially rotates the shoulder, and adducts the shoulder. It doesn't act on the forearm. And the biceps brachii muscle, we have just mentioned that the biceps brachii is a flexor of the elbow and is located in the anterior compartment of the arm and flexes the elbow. It doesn't extend the forearm. A muscle that performs the desired action is referred to as the muscle that performs the desired action is the agonist. The antagonist, as the name indicates, is the opposing muscle, and if the antagonist stretches and yields to the agonist or the prime mover. The prime mover is the other name of an agonist. A fixator stabilizes the origin of the prime mover of the agonist, but it does not produce the movement of the agonist. It helps, it fixes and stabilizes the origin. A convergent muscles are the muscles where the origin is wider than the point of insertion. So the fiber arrangement allows for maximum force production. An example is pectoralis major muscle. So a convergent muscle is a description of the shape of the muscle. It is not a description of the function of the muscle. The synergist, they assist the prime mover. So they assist the agonist. So in other words, when muscles contract, the movement is the result of several muscles working together at the same time. Now, this is a kind of virtual lab question. This movement is, you can see here, the sole of the foot is rotated so that it faces inwards. So this movement is not a dorsiflexion. Dorsiflexion is when the dorsum of the foot is elevated. Plantar flexion is when the sole of the foot is depressed, and these movements take place at the ankle joint. Adduction, this is not an adduction, and it is not an eversion. Eversion is when the sole of the foot faces laterally. So this is a movement of inversion. And inversion and eversion are special movements that occur in the foot, in between the tarsal bones, and this is inversion. Which of the following best describes the action of this muscle? First of all, you have to identify the muscle. The muscle here is latissimus dorsi, the wide flat muscle of the back. A abducts the arm. It doesn't abduct the arm. On the contrary, it adducts the arm. It's attached to the back, the iliac crest, and extends anteriorly to the humerus. So it adducts the arm. And the best thing to remember the action of this muscle is to remember how to scratch your opposite scapula. In that case, you need to adduct extend the shoulder, and medially rotate the shoulder. So these are the actions of the latissimus dorsi muscle. It doesn't abduct. What abducts the arm at the shoulder joint is mainly the deltoid muscle. Extends the head. It's not attached to the head, and so it doesn't extend the head. What extends the head here is the trapezius muscle. The two muscles here that look like a trapezium, and it is the upper fibers of trapezius that extend the head. Extends the arm. Yes, it extends the arm at the shoulder joint. I have just mentioned about scratching the opposite scapula. So it adducts and extends the arm. Extends the forearm. It's not attached to the bones of the forearm, so it doesn't work on the bones of the forearm. Protracts the scapula. It doesn't protract the scapula. The muscle that protracts the scapula is the boxer's muscle, the serratus anterior muscle. So this muscle, latissimus dorsi, extends the arm at the shoulder joint, and this will be the correct answer. Okay, thank you and good luck.